Yeah, here we go. You know, first day of basketball, I say this every year, official practice isn't what it used to be because of the access that we get to the student athletes in the off season compared to 5, 10 years ago. But it's still a milestone. You know, we're getting near the start date for another season, and especially with what everyone is going through with how the season ended, how much start and stop everyone has had to experience since the end of last season. It's nice to, if you will, see land and know that we're inching closer to possible games.
Coach, can you talk about the type of restrictions that you guys are going to be seeing at practice today?
You know, we've been working with our administration on any state guidelines to ensure our student athletes remain safe and in compliance with both the state and the NCAA testing protocols as we progress toward the beginning of the season. So they've been in place in terms of how we conduct ourselves for quite some time with masks and, so, you know, staying away from being close to one another, et cetera. So, you know, we've got a great feel for that, and we'll continue to move forward with the same protocols.
Are you able to have full rostered practices today, or is it still like the max of 10 guys right now for you?
Again, I just said the same thing, that we've been working with our administration on any state guidelines to make sure we're in compliance, and we've been doing that since it hit, and we'll continue doing that.
Hey, Chris, you talked a little bit about the more access you have in the off season now. I'm curious how that has changed through the years, how you prepare for a season. Do you start implementing stuff, you know, as far back as July or whenever, or is there still sort of something that you're waiting for now to kind of start when the practices, I guess, officially start? When you have more access, what is it that you started earlier?
First of all, it's nice to hear a basketball question. Appreciate that, Jeff. It's definitely changed. You don't feel as pressed for time to get everything in before the start date of the official season for games anyway. In the past, when it was October 15th or whatever it was, you were jam-packed. I mean, you had to have an itinerary every day and a progression chronologically of what you were going to put in when, so you were prepared once the games hit. Now, with the access we have in the spring, summer, and fall, there's no pressure that way. You have all the time in the world to put things in at your leisure and to not skip over things. So it's much nicer in that respect. Some coaches will tell you that they'd rather it the other way. I mean, we coach our kids for, 38 weeks maybe, if you want to, out of 52. You can actually be on the floor with them and teach and coach them. And that's a long grind. You know, that's, if you really think about it, that's a lot of teaching and coaching. And so some will argue that it's too much, but I don't think anyone can argue that being around the guys more is good for the program. It's good for them. And certainly good for not having to crunch everything in. And what I like about it for me is, you know, we'll take more days off than we used to. You know, we're not going to go more than 2-3 days in a row. I think it's such a marathon that if you want to stay injury-free, knock on wood, which obviously we haven't been very good at in the last 12 months, but I think that's a big key to it, and to keep their minds and their bodies fresh for such a long season. I think if coaches choose to look at it as a marathon, and like I said, because of the access, you can look at it that way and not have to go 5-6 days in a row like you used to. And I think that's a big advantage and the luxury to do right now.
Coach, do you have a goal of a certain number of maybe non-conference games that you would want to play before you get into the WAC schedule? I know you had the Northern Iowa games scheduled. I know it fell after that 24th, 25th November start date. Are you still working to get maybe, is that game still on, and are you trying to get maybe sneak some other games in there before the WAC play kicks off?
You know, every coach has complained about scheduling since we started playing basketball and we started having a larger schedule. back in the day, they didn't play as many games as we do now. And so scheduling is difficult. You guys have been around the industry long enough to know, I mean, what coach in America gets on any sort of interview and says they love scheduling? It's a joy and they get so much out of it. You don't hear that. And now it's just a different game. I mean, everyone's scheduling, and it's the middle of October, and more people are not done with their schedule than they are done. And I think it's going to go into November because it just is what it is. And there's a lot of moving parts. So we're a long way from being over. We work diligently at it daily. We'd love to be able to release a schedule and get people excited about games and make plans, et cetera. But we're quite a ways away from getting that done. But eventually, we're going to pair up with as many other schools as we can. And, our goal is to play a full schedule. We're going to try to get 27 games, which is the maximum allowed. Now, obviously, it'll unfold the way it does in terms of how many games are canceled or postponed due to COVID on, either team. But, right now, I don't have a specific goal. I hope we can get, 7 non-conference games before the WAC starts. I mean, we're trying to play as many as we can, and we're going to schedule as many as we can and try to, put as good a schedule together as we can, considering the market that there is right now.
How important is playing those UTEP and UNM games? Obviously, those before that start date, but talk about maybe pushing them back. But how important are keeping those rivalry games on the schedule, I guess?
Certainly, I can't speak for the other programs, but for us, I mean, it's of utmost importance, for a number of reasons. One, just the historical perspective. You guys would know more than me, but I have no idea when's the last time that, we didn't play UTEP and New Mexico twice in the same season. To be a project for someone to take under their wing. I have no idea, but I'm sure it's been a long time, and we certainly don't want to break that streak for obvious reasons. But then even more importantly, this year, we don't have a lot of opportunities to play against schools that are in driving distance for us. And with the COVID going on and the protocols and the measures that are required to keep your team safe and try to bubble up as best you can, then make more sense. And you'll see, and if you're following it, you'll see a lot more regional games this year than you have in the past. You're going to see more high major schools play mid-majors because it's within driving distance, and it takes away a lot of the logistics and a lot of the issues you have to deal with when you're traveling with the team. Unfortunately for us, we don't have as many opportunities to do that. So this season, it's huge to be able to get those 4 games and be able to drive and not have to get on a plane, stay in other people's hotels, et cetera. So, from where I sit right now, I mean, everything seems to, be on schedule to be able to get all 4 games in. We're still working out with each other on potential dates and making it work for everybody's respective schedule. But everyone's been great to work with, and we're just trying to figure it all out.
Is there just to follow up, because it's a scheduling question, is there any talk or any possibility of a regional MTE that isn't yet scheduled, maybe even between UTEP, NMSU, or UNM, or is there any possibility of knocking out 2-3 games at one of those 3 locations here in the region?
There's been some behind the scenes talk with our staffs about that possibility. It's premature to say that would happen. There would be a lot of legwork still need to be done. Obviously, to make something like that happen is a lot of moving parts, et cetera. But I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. The more games we can get that we don't have to get on a plane, that's one of my goals. The more games we can drive to and keep our crew together rather than having to, deal with connections and the airport folks and, all that goes in with that, we're going to do, but it's unrealistic, I think, to think that we can get all 11 games scheduled with teams that we don't necessarily have to fly, but we're trying to keep it at a minimum if we can.
Coach, obviously, a lot of new guys on the roster this year. Over the course of the last few months, how have they kind of gotten integrated into the team, and how pleased are you with just kind of the process of getting everybody kind of on the same page, I guess?
It's been a struggle for us, the way we do it. The grind is important. It takes a while for our new guys to adjust to expectations that we have and how we go about approaching our practices and the output that we'd like from our guys on a daily basis. And not having a normal off season certainly has stunted their growth. But again, I get it. It's no different than anywhere else. I'm here telling you that it's different for us because of how we do it, but I'm sure most coaches feel the same way. But so that's the obvious. I mean, we definitely feel behind. I mean, that's the word I think everybody would probably be using. You've just got to accept it. You've got to understand that I would assume most people feel that way, although some people have been luckier than others in terms of their stoppages, where they haven't had any stoppages, or if they've had stoppages, they've been very minimal and it hasn't hurt in the progress and the growth of their individuals and their team. But, we got a long way to go, and certainly as a fan or as a media member, you're probably thinking, well, man, you got all the way to November 25th. But for me, it just feels like it's creeping up on us pretty quickly, and we got a long road ahead of us to get to where we can compete at the level that people expect us to do. So like I tell our guys, like when we couldn't get with them, COVID doesn't care about that. The basketball doesn't care about COVID. And find a way to stay in shape. Do what you can to keep your mind and your body in tune. And just for us as a team, the people that follow us, they're not going to care about that either. They're going to want us to perform and play well and, produce like we have been. So that's just the way of the world. And we understand that. And we've got to do our job to get our guys up to speed as quickly as we can.
Coach, you were some guys that have done a good job of doing that, of kind of working on their own time.
It's been a while now. Obviously, we've been together more now than we had been in the spring or the summer. But some guys that did a good job, I guess, just from the eye test, we're not with them. We weren't able to visualize it, but certainly once we were able to start working with our guys on the floor, you could see, who was in better shape and whose bodies looked like they had found a way to, keep it in not game shape, but keep it in practice shape. Guys that stick out to me, Jabari Rice, he's a basketball junkie and he spends a lot of time working on his game and finding a way to get better. And so the guys that, were work ethic guys prior to COVID were still the guys that did the best job during COVID. And Clayton Henry was another one. He looked great, once we got back on the court with him. So if I had to single a couple of guys out, they would probably be the two guys that come to mind that did a good job, while we were shut down.
And then talking about the necessary experience about integrating a quick team, guys coming back. But talk about a guy like Donnie Tillman, where he has game experience at a couple different places and now coming in with you guys. Has he been able to use that experience to sort of assimilate himself quickly? What have you seen that he's brought immediately to your team culture?
He has. Donnie has been a nice shot in the arm for our program. Like you mentioned, he's got 3 years of really good college basketball experience at Utah and UNLV, where he's playing at a pretty high level, being coached at a high level. So for him walking in the door, it wasn't as big a change in climate, if you will, compared to maybe some other guys. So he was ahead of the curve because of that. And then the way he's built, he's big, strong kid, medium-sized forward, that's kind of rugged. So he fits us very, very well. We've been very, very pleased with his transition. We're excited about having him. Certainly it's a 1-year situation. We'd love to have him longer, but if he continues to progress, continues to learn, I think he'll have a chance to have a pretty big impact for our team going forward.
Is he a guy who has a position? Because he's so rangy, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of a new age deal where that positionless basketball is in vogue, and he certainly fits that category. We still have a numbered system that we use, but it's more for organization than it is anything else. I always tell our kids on the daily that, hey, whatever you're capable of doing, you're going to be allowed to do that when the lights are on. If you're a 3-point shooter and you're open, shoot it. If, you have an advantage to try to take someone off the bounce, then do it. But, the games aren't necessarily a time for experimentation. That all needs to be worked out in practice. But he definitely is a versatile guy. And for me, being versatile, more importantly, is on the defensive end. He literally can guard 3, 4, 5 because of his girth, his length, his quickness. He's able to defend on the perimeter as well as guard the block a little bit. So that's exciting for me and for him to be able to move him up and down the roster. He's like Johnny that way, where he's capable of defending, at different places on the floor. And to have a couple guys like that now that primarily play the forward position certainly gets us excited.
Coach, how's Donnie doing health-wise? I know last time we talked, he said he'd been dealing with an illness and lost some weight, stuff like that.
Yeah, he's much better. I think he's back to his weight prior to the illness. He knocked a tooth out not too long ago that required him to miss a couple of days to see the dentist, et cetera. He's playing with a mouth guard right now, and it's kind of interesting watching him because he's a very verbal player, which every coach in America loves having on their team. And, to hear him muffled, he's not as verbal as he once was, but he's trying. And I think he'll be relieved when he can get the tooth put back in and get that mouth guard out, even though I'm assuming he'll have to wear that for a while until it's secured, et cetera. But he's back to, his playing weight, and he looks good.
I guess, obviously you said you're not where you want to be just yet, but what do you feel is kind of the ceiling of this team this year if everything kind of goes your way and you get to where you want to?
It's a good question. I think we have enough talent, which pretty good place to start. I don't think we're going to be, oh my gosh, just overly talented or just exuding up and down the roster. I'm not sure our depth is quite what it was in the past couple of years. Certainly, because of our depth going into last year, we were able to survive, if you will, the injuries that happened to us. And once we figured it out, we're able to flourish even in spite of major injuries at major positions hitting us. And I'm not sure we're built for something like that this year, but hopefully, knock on wood, we'll never have to experience something like that again. But our top end guys who normally at this time of the year, I would tell you I have no idea, who's going to start. And certainly, I'm in no position to even talk about that. We're so far away from playing our first game. But if you let your mind wander, and I try not to, I try to, just let it happen organically and not peg people into spots and start looking at them through that lens. I don't think that's fair to the competition. I don't think that's fair to our team. But I'm human at the same time. And it's pretty easy right now to see some differences between positions in terms of not so certainly positions, but depth chart, if you will, if you want to look at it that way. And so I think I'm hopeful that our top end guys, our starters, should be some pretty talented group of guys. And so the biggest key for us is we have more newcomers this year than we've had in quite some time, and to get some of those guys up to speed, to get some of those guys integrated into how we play and how they can provide a role for us this year. And so keeping those guys healthy, keeping them focused, and then adding some new players to the mix and getting them confident, getting us confident in them, I think would be the biggest key for us in the next 6 weeks. And if we're able to do that, then we have a chance to be pretty good.
Coach, I think today, actually, the NCAA maybe might make a decision on eligibility for NCAA winter athletes this year and whether or not they get an extra year. I know with fall athletes this year, they're doing that where even if you play, you get another year next year. Do you think that they should do the same for winter athletes for this season?
Oh, gosh. I don't answer questions like that because they don't ask me those type of questions. I got no influence whatsoever when it comes to making decisions like that in college basketball. So I'm just not one to to get into the back and forth and why, and, argue points that are waste of time. So we'll deal with whatever they decide. Like everything, I just kind of try to roll with the punches and let the people with the power, I guess, if you will, make those decisions. And certainly any input that we have is behind the scenes with any voting member that, we have a relationship with as a member of the NCAA, and, but how much influence that wields probably isn't that powerful. So, I don't know. We'll see what they decide, and we'll adjust and roll with the punches.
Obviously, this past offseason was kind of unlike any other that you've experienced. And, you mentioned in March, that 19-game winning streak that we entered the season on. You kind of use that as a carrot on the recruiting trail. How much of a carrot is that now, when you kind of look at, hey, the season starts 1 month from now, we're going to have, as it were, kind of a target on our back like we always do. How much do you kind of integrate that into everything and use that as a talking point?
Great question. My answer would be not yet. We're so far away from thinking that, we're a good team. We're so far away from worrying about that. Hopefully we can get to that point here in the next few weeks where that could be a rallying cry for this year's group. But at this point, I'm more worried about getting them to develop habits of jumping to the ball or talking on defense or what have you. And we just got a lot of new guys that have learning curve is steep right now with limitations that have been placed upon us, and because of the obvious, we're just a long ways away from really locking into trying to fine tune us, try to motivate us. It's more teaching and coaching and learning and absorbing and getting into that grind mentality, and obviously with the additional hours that are available now, we'll be able to take a deeper breath and spend more time watching video and learning that way, and being around our guys more than we have on the practice court. So, certainly it's in the back of my mind, but it's not something that I think about very often. I'm sure as the games get closer, it'll be more of a rallying cry and something that we'll talk about. Although last year, until we got toward the end, we really didn't discuss it. We just treated every game the same. And I think that's the best approach that you can have, and putting all that pressure on us as a program probably wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. So we'll see how all that plays out. Hey, I got this new fancy little background. Y'all see that? Can you see that? It looks like, when I look at myself, it looks like I have no ears. Does it look like that way to you?
It depends on the angle when you
guys see ears?
Yeah.
Huh?
There you go.
There you go.
Anyway, first time I've ever used it, I thought, you know what? I need to up my Zoom game a little bit.
It's a good touch.
Yeah. So anyway, carry on.
Since you went off course, I'm going to ask you an off course question. What's more frustrating, dealing with these testing questions or the Twins' 18-game playoff losing streak?
Definitely the testing questions. We've had to educate ourselves as best as we can to make sure we're knowledgeable on, certainly we can lean on our athletic training staff and doctors and our NMSU COVID advisory group, or I'm not sure if that's the exact wording of that group, but definitely it's been a crash course in the coronavirus and pandemic and testing and quarantining, and it's just a crazy time, man. None of us ever have to go through it again, and hopefully we can get out of this at some point, but it's just a very odd time in all of our lives.
I guess when you take a look back at, this past summer, it's kind of a weird question. Was recruiting, do you think you found it, you and your staff a little easier or a little more difficult? I mean, and how did you kind of adjust on the fly to make it either easy or, and for yourselves during that period of time?
I would say it was easier on your body. It was easier on your time. It was easier on the budget. I don't think it was any easier in securing commitments. But the playing field was probably evened out a little bit, I think, because of budgetary concerns, proximity to players. We don't have as many players in proximity for unofficial visits, etc. So I don't know. I mean, I have unbelievable staff, and they adjusted on the fly, and they're more tech savvy than I am, and certainly helped me be able to operate in that world as well. I think we've learned a lot that way, but it looks like it's going to be that way for a while. With right now, I think January 1st being the first date that, which was then moved back a number of times. Who knows if it will actually happen, where the coaches can go on the road and evaluate in person, etc. So it's just another offshoot of the coronavirus that we're all having to deal with.
Anybody have anything else for Coach?
All right, guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having us, Coach. Appreciate you doing this.
Appreciate it.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.